There are moments in life that don't feel real until you see your own name in the wrong place. Not on a birthday card, not on a work email, not on a certificate or a form you willingly signed. I mean your name attached to something you never agreed to, something you didn't authorize, something that can change your life without your permission. That was the moment everything shifted for me. Because once your name has been used without asking, your sense of safety changes. I used to believe my name meant something simple. It meant responsibility, trust, identity. It represented the person I worked hard to be. I'm not someone who takes shortcuts. I pay my bills, I keep my promises. I don't borrow what I can't repay. I've lived my life carefully. Not perfectly, but carefully. So when people talk about identity theft or fraud, I used to think of it as something that happened to someone else. Someone careless, someone who ignored warning signs, someone who didn't protect themselves. I didn't think I was that person. And to be fair, I wasn't careless. I was trusting, which isn't the same thing, but the outcome can look similar. This story started quietly, the way so many life-changing stories do. It was a regular morning. I was drinking coffee, half awake, scrolling through emails and reminders. Nothing urgent, nothing dramatic. Then I saw it, a notification about a credit check. At first, I assumed it was spam, one of those generic alerts meant to scare you into clicking a link. But it had details. My full name, my address, a timestamp. It looked real. My stomach tightened. I hadn't applied for anything. I hadn't signed up for a new account. I hadn't authorized any kind of credit check. So why was someone checking my credit? I told myself it had to be a mistake, a mix-up, a clerical error. That's what we tell ourselves first, because the alternative feels too big to accept. I logged into my credit monitoring account and looked closer. The inquiry was there. Real. And it wasn't the only one. There were multiple. Recent. Some of them from places I didn't recognize. And suddenly, my coffee didn't taste like anything. I felt that cold, sharp kind of fear, the kind that comes before your brain catches up. I grabbed my phone and started making calls. At first, it was all confusion. Automated systems, long hold times, representatives repeating the same lines. Can you verify your identity? Can you confirm your date of birth? Can you confirm your previous address? I answered everything quickly, my voice controlled, but my heart racing. When I finally got through to someone who could tell me more, I heard something that made my hands go numb. There was an account opened under my name. Not a small one, a line of credit. Active, with a balance already growing. I didn't speak for a moment. I couldn't, because the shock wasn't just financial, it was personal. Someone had done this. Someone had used my name. And it wasn't a stranger in a dark room across the country. Not in my case, because as I listened to the details, the address on file, the contact number used, I recognized pieces of it. Not all at once, but enough to form a terrifying possibility. This wasn't random. This was close. Too close. I tried to stay calm. I asked the representative what steps I needed to take. They advised me to freeze my credit, file a dispute, submit identity verification, possibly file a police report. The words sounded surreal. Police report, fraud, dispute. These were things I associated with distant situations, not my own life. But now it was in my name, and I didn't have time to sit in disbelief. I had to act. I froze my credit that same day, all 3 bureaus. I changed passwords. I checked every account I had, banking, credit cards, subscriptions. I thought I would find more damage immediately, but the truth was stranger. Most of my accounts were untouched, which didn't comfort me. It confused me. because it meant this wasn't chaotic theft. It was targeted. Someone wasn't trying to drain my whole life in one day. They were trying to use my identity in a way that wouldn't get noticed right away. That is its own kind of violation. I spent that evening going through paperwork like a detective, statements, old mail, any clue that could explain how this happened. And then I noticed something I hadn't thought about in years. A document I had once shared with someone in my family. Not because they demanded it, because they asked, because I trusted them. It seemed harmless at the time. A copy of my information, just in case. For a form, for something temporary, for convenience. I remember thinking, it's family, it's fine. But now that memory felt different, like a door I'd left unlocked. I didn't accuse anyone immediately. I didn't want it to be someone close. I didn't want it to be. Because if it was someone close, then this wasn't just fraud. It was betrayal. And betrayal is harder to process than loss. Loss is painful, but betrayal changes the way you see everything. I tried to approach it logically. Maybe my information was leaked somewhere else. Maybe a data breach. Maybe my mail had been stolen. Maybe it was just bad luck. So I dug deeper. I requested more details on the account. I asked about the verification steps, what information had been used to open it. And the more I learned, the less random it seemed. The email was unfamiliar, but the phone number? I recognized it. Not fully at first, just a sense of familiarity. Then I remembered where I'd seen it. It belonged to someone in my family, a number I had saved in my phone for years. I stared at my screen like it was a hallucination. My first instinct wasn't anger. It was disbelief, because the idea didn't fit my understanding of them, of us, a family. I tried to tell myself there had to be an explanation, a mistake, a misunderstanding, something, anything, because the alternative meant acknowledging something I wasn't ready to face, that someone I trusted used my name as if it were theirs. That night, I didn't sleep. Not because I was panicking loudly, but because my mind wouldn't stop replaying the same thoughts. How long has this been happening? What else is under my name? Why would they do this? How could they not tell me? And the hardest question of all, if they could do this, what else were they capable of? The next morning, I didn't confront them yet. I knew myself well enough to know that if I spoke too soon, I'd speak from emotion. I needed facts. I needed proof. Because once you accuse someone in your family, you can't undo it, even if you're right. I started gathering everything: copies of inquiries, account details, screenshots, dates. I made a timeline. I documented everything like I was building a case, because in a way, I was. Not just against them, against doubt, against denial, against the part of me that wanted to pretend this wasn't real. I looked at my own name on those documents again and again, and each time it felt less like an identity and more like a weapon someone had used, without asking, without warning, without care. And I realized something with a quiet, crushing clarity. This wasn't just about money. It was about permission, about respect, about whether my identity was considered mine at all. And in the days ahead, I would have to decide what mattered more, keeping the peace or protecting myself. Once I had the facts in front of me, it became impossible to pretend this was just a weird glitch. The phone number on the account was real. It belonged to someone I loved, someone I trusted, someone who had hugged me at holidays, called me on birthdays, and spoken about family like it meant protection. And now that same connection was sitting on a piece of paperwork that felt like a crime scene. I stared at it for a long time, waiting for my brain to reject it as impossible. But it didn't. Instead, something colder settled in: acceptance. Not acceptance in the peaceful sense, acceptance in the "this is real and I have to deal with it" sense. Still, I didn't confront them immediately. That surprised even me, because most people assume that once you know someone close has used your name without permission, you'd explode. You'd call them, you'd demand answers, you'd accuse them. But I didn't, because the truth is, family betrayal doesn't come with one emotion. It comes with layers: confusion, shock, grief, and a deep, quiet fear that the moment you speak out loud, your entire family structure will split. I wasn't afraid of conflict. I was afraid of what conflict would confirm: that someone I trusted had decided my identity was something they could borrow, or use, or gamble with, and that I was expected to just absorb it. I needed to understand how far it went, so I kept digging. I requested a full credit report from all 3 bureaus. I did it carefully, like I was bracing for impact. When I opened the reports, I felt my stomach drop. There weren't just inquiries, there were accounts I didn't recognize. Not dozens, not a complete wreckage, but enough. Enough to show a pattern, a deliberate pattern. It looked like someone had opened one account, then tested boundaries, then opened another, trying to build something in my name slowly, without triggering panic. That kind of theft isn't reckless, it's calculated. And the worst part about calculated betrayal is that it's hard to explain away as a mistake. Mistakes happen once, patterns happen on purpose. I made more calls. I spoke to more representatives. Each one asked the same questions. Each one confirmed the same truth. These accounts were opened under your Social Security number. These inquiries were authorized using your information. These balances are your responsibility unless proven otherwise. Your responsibility, even when you didn't agree, even when you didn't know, even when someone else benefited. That's what hurt. The way the system treats your identity as proof, even when you're the one being violated. I filed disputes. I submitted documentation. I wrote statements explaining that these accounts were fraudulent. Some companies responded quickly. Others treated me like I was trying to escape debt, like I was lying, like I was careless, like I deserved suspicion. I remember one representative telling me, "We see this a lot." And I wanted to scream, "Well, I don't." Because for me, it wasn't a statistic. It was my life, my name, my stability, my future. I froze my credit again just to be sure. Then I took another step that made my throat tighten. I filed an identity theft report with the proper agencies. The language was formal. I had to describe what happened. I had to write it down as if it were objective, but it wasn't objective. It was personal. It felt like I was documenting betrayal in real time. After that, there was only one thing left to do. I had to talk to them, because I needed to. Because every hour I waited, the damage could grow, and silence wouldn't protect me anymore. It never had. I drove to their house with my hands tight on the steering wheel. I practiced what I would say in my head. Not dramatic, not emotional, just factual. I found an account under my name. I need you to explain why your number is connected to it. I need to know what happened. But as I pulled into the driveway, my heart pounded like I was walking into a courtroom instead of a family conversation. They opened the door like everything was normal, like I wasn't carrying a storm in my chest. They smiled, asked how I was, made a casual comment about the weather, and for a second, I almost believed I had imagined it. Almost. But then I saw myself reflected in the glass of their front door, holding a folder full of proof, and I remembered why I was there. I sat down. I didn't ease into it. I couldn't. I pulled out the documents and placed them on the table. I asked them directly, "Why is your number connected to an account opened under my name?" Their face changed immediately. Not confusion, not surprise, recognition. And that expression told me everything before they said a word. They tried to laugh at first, a quick, nervous laugh. They said it must be a mistake. They said they didn't know anything about it. I watched them carefully. Then I slid the next page forward. The inquiries, the dates, the account details, the evidence. They stared at it and went quiet. No laugh now, no casual tone, just silence. I waited. They finally said, softly, "I was going to tell you." That sentence is the most dangerous sentence in family betrayal because it's meant to soften the truth. It's meant to sound like an intention matters more than an action. I didn't respond emotionally. I just asked, when? They looked down. They said they were stressed. They said they were going through a hard time. They said they didn't have options. Then they said something I still can't fully comprehend. It wasn't supposed to hurt you. I stared at them, because what does that even mean? Using my identity was a choice. Hurting me wasn't an accident. Hurting me was a consequence they decided I could carry. They admitted it. Not all at once, but in pieces. They said they needed credit to get something approved. They said they couldn't qualify on their own. They said they only meant to borrow my name temporarily. Temporarily, like identity has an expiration date, like damage can be undone with a promise. I asked how many accounts. They hesitated, then said, just a couple. That phrase, just a couple, felt like someone trying to minimize a fire while smoke fills the room. I told them I had the reports. I knew it was more than one. Their face tightened. And then they got defensive. They accused me of not understanding their situation. They said family is supposed to help. They said they were desperate. They said, I didn't think you'd even notice. That sentence made my skin go cold because it confirmed something I hadn't wanted to admit. They didn't just take my identity, they calculated my silence. They counted on me being the type of person who avoids conflict, who wants peace, who wants to believe the best in people. They used who I am against me, and I realized something. The money mattered, the fraud mattered, but the deeper violation was the assumption, the belief that my name was something they could use because I wouldn't fight back. I told them I had filed reports. I told them I had frozen everything. I told them I was disputing the accounts. Their expression shifted, not into remorse, into fear of consequences. And I understood then that their regret wasn't about what they did to me. It was about what might happen to them. They begged me not to involve anyone else. They asked me to handle it privately. They promised they would pay it back. They said they would fix it. And for a moment, a familiar feeling rose in me. That old instinct. The instinct to keep peace, to keep things quiet, to avoid being the one who breaks the family. But then I looked at the papers again. My name, my identity, my future. And I knew I couldn't carry this quietly anymore, because they had already used my silence as permission once, and I would not give them that permission again. I left their house with the folder still clutched in my hands like it was the only solid thing in the world. I didn't slam the door. I didn't shout. I didn't cry in front of them. I walked out quietly because my body was doing what it had always done, choosing control when everything inside felt unstable. But as soon as I got into my car, my hands started shaking, not from fear of them, from the realization that I had just confirmed something that couldn't be unconfirmed. Someone in my family had used my name without permission, and now I had to decide what kind of person I was going to be about it. They texted me almost immediately. Apologies, explanations, promises. They said they'd make payments. They said they'd close accounts. They said they'd fix it. But I had learned something important already. The kind of person who uses your identity without asking is not someone who fixes things quickly, because if they cared about fixing things, they wouldn't have created the damage in the first place. Still, I didn't want to destroy them. That's the part people don't understand. You can feel betrayed and still love someone. You can be furious and still want to protect the relationship. I sat in my driveway that night and stared at the dashboard for a long time, feeling like I was holding two impossible truths at the same time. They hurt me, and they were still family. The next day, I did what I had been doing since the started. I focused on action. I called every lender connected to those accounts. I asked for fraud departments. I documented conversations. I wrote down representative names, case numbers, reference codes. I didn't speak like someone panicking. I spoke like someone building a wall, because that's what I was doing, building protection. I filed more disputes. Some lenders needed proof of my identity, some needed written statements, some wanted an identity theft report number, and every time I submitted something, I felt both relief and grief. Relief that I was doing something, grief that I had to do it at all. One company denied my dispute at first. They claimed the account was opened properly. They said someone had completed the application and verified information. They said the activity looked consistent. Consistent. That word made my stomach twist. Of course it looked consistent, because someone close to me knew my details. They knew enough to pass. That's the terrifying part about betrayal inside a family. It isn't sloppy, it's easy. I appealed. I submitted more documentation. I was patient, but firm, because I understood something now. If I didn't fight for my own name, no one else would. Meanwhile, my family member kept messaging me. They asked how they could make it right. They asked me not to tell anyone else. They told me it would ruin them. They promised to pay everything back if I just gave them time. Time. That word has a different meaning when you're the one carrying consequences. Because time doesn't pause interest, it doesn't pause late fees, it doesn't pause credit damage. Time just keeps moving. And every day they asked for time, my life was being affected. My credit score had already dropped, not dramatically yet, but enough to notice. I watched it shift downward like a slow leak, and with every shift, I felt something harden inside me. Not cruelty, boundaries. I told them once, clearly, I'm not covering this up. I'm handling it correctly. I'm protecting myself. They didn't respond right away. When they did, their tone changed. They became defensive again. They said I was overreacting. They said I was making it worse. They said, you're acting like I'm a criminal. And I remember thinking quietly, you acted like my identity wasn't mine. What else should I call that? Still, I kept my voice steady. I didn't argue, because arguing would keep me trapped in emotion, and emotion was the place they wanted me to stay. Emotion makes you hesitate. Emotion makes you feel guilty. Emotion makes you question yourself. Facts don't. Facts hold their shape, and I needed shape. I spoke with an attorney for guidance, not to attack, but to understand. I needed to know my rights and responsibilities. They asked me questions and explained the options. Some paths were straightforward, some were complicated. All of them required one thing from me: consistency. I learned that identity fraud cases can take time. Months, sometimes longer. I learned that proving you didn't open something can be harder than you think, especially when the person who did it had access to your personal details. And I learned something that made my stomach drop. If I didn't handle it correctly, I could become responsible by default, not because I did it, but because I didn't dispute it properly, because I didn't follow procedure, because I stayed silent. Silence again. It always comes back to silence. That's when I knew I had no choice but to be thorough. No shortcuts, no handling it privately, no covering. I wasn't going to destroy my own future to protect someone who gambled with it. The hardest part wasn't paperwork. It was the emotional pressure. Family members started calling me. Not all of them had details yet, but they had heard something. They asked why things felt tense, why I was distant, why I was upset. I kept it minimal. I didn't share everything. Not yet. I didn't want to create drama. But the more questions I received, the more I realized this wasn't going to stay contained. Not because I wanted it to, but because family secrets rarely stay secret when money and consequences are involved. Eventually, someone asked me directly if it was true, if my name had been used, if I was making a big deal out of it. I took a deep breath, and I said, yes. Not dramatically, not bitterly, just factually. Yes, my name was used without permission. I'm handling it. There was silence on the other end. Then the conversation shifted. Some people became sympathetic, some became cautious, some immediately defended the person who had done it. They said they were struggling. They said they didn't mean harm. They said I should be understanding. Understanding, another word that can be used to erase accountability. I listened, and then I said something I never thought I'd say out loud. Struggling doesn't give someone permission to take my identity. That sentence felt like stepping into my own voice, a voice I had muted for years to keep family peace. And once I spoke it, I couldn't go back. The family member who did it stopped apologizing. They started blaming. They said I was ruining them. They said I was choosing paperwork over people. They said I was breaking the family. And for a moment, the guilt returned, sharp and familiar. Because that's what family guilt does. It doesn't ask if you're right, it asks if you're willing to carry discomfort. But then I looked at what I was dealing with, the credit score damage, the calls, the reports, and I understood something clearly. They broke the peace when they used my name. I was just refusing to carry the damage quietly. There's a difference. Weeks passed, then months. Slow progress. Some accounts were closed. Some disputes were successfully contested. Some lenders removed negative marks after investigation. Not all, not immediately, but enough to show that fighting mattered. In the middle of that process, something changed inside me. I stopped feeling shocked. I stopped needing their approval to protect myself. I stopped hoping they would fully understand what they had done. Because understanding wasn't the goal anymore. Protection was. I still loved my family, but I no longer trusted them with my vulnerability. I no longer trusted them with access. I had learned the cost of that trust, and now my future demanded something else. Boundaries, clarity, and the courage to be the person who doesn't stay silent just to keep the peace. By the time the situation began to stabilize, I had already changed. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way anyone could point to and say, that's the moment she became different. It happened quietly, through paperwork and phone calls, through nights when I couldn't sleep, through the slow realization that I had been forced to protect myself from people I once assumed would protect me. Some accounts were removed from my credit report. Others were closed but left marks behind that took longer to resolve. A few disputes required appeals. Some required patience I didn't know I had. And through all of it, I learned something I will never forget. Fixing the damage takes longer than causing it. Someone can use your name in minutes, but it can take months, sometimes years, to rebuild what that act destroys. At one point, I received a letter confirming that one of the major accounts had been ruled fraudulent and removed. I remember holding that letter in my hands and waiting to feel relief. But the relief didn't arrive the way I expected. What arrived was exhaustion, because even with a win, I could feel the weight of what it took to get there. I had spent hours on hold, days tracking down documents, weeks following up. I had explained the story so many times that it stopped feeling like something happening to me and started feeling like a case number. Still, that letter mattered, not just because it improved my credit, but because it reminded me that my name still belonged to me and that I had fought for it. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post about it. I just sat down quietly and let myself breathe. The relationship with the family member who used my identity didn't recover quickly. Maybe it never fully will. There was too much unsaid, too much damage beneath the surface. We spoke less. When we did, the conversations were shallow, safe topics only. Weather, work, things that didn't require trust. Because trust, once broken this way, isn't repaired with a single apology. It's repaired, if it's repaired at all, through consistent accountability over time. And I didn't see that. What I did see was avoidance, distance, a kind of quiet resentment on their side, as if they believed I had punished them by refusing to stay silent. I didn't hate them. That's the complicated truth. I didn't hate them. I was hurt, I was disappointed, and I was awake now in a way I hadn't been before. There's a difference between forgiveness and access. I could forgive them in my heart one day if I chose, but I would never give them access again. Not to my information, not to my paperwork, not to the parts of my life that require protection. I had learned, painfully, that family closeness doesn't automatically equal safety. Sometimes closeness is exactly what makes a violation easier. I tightened my boundaries across the board. I updated passwords, added two-factor authentication, secured physical documents. I stopped leaving sensitive mail unopened. I set up alerts for everything. And I stopped feeling guilty about it. Because vigilance isn't paranoia when you've been proven vulnerable. It's wisdom. I also started talking about it differently, with myself. At first, I had felt embarrassed, because victimization comes with shame in a way people don't talk about. You wonder what you missed. You wonder how you could be so trusting. You wonder if you somehow allowed it. But over time, I stopped blaming myself. Because there is no version of being family that justifies using someone else's identity. None. Trust is not consent. Being close is not permission. And love is not a blank check. The biggest shift in me wasn't financial. It was personal. I stopped prioritizing peace above all else. For most of my life, I had believed being a good family member meant keeping things calm, not bringing up hard topics, not embarrassing anyone, not making people uncomfortable. But now, I understood something that changed everything. Peace that requires my silence isn't peace. It's control. And I don't call that love anymore. It took time, but eventually my credit began to recover. Not perfectly, not instantly, but steadily. Each month, the numbers moved in the right direction. Each dispute resolved meant one less weight on my future. I was able to apply for things again without fear. I stopped holding my breath every time my phone buzzed. I stopped bracing for bad news. And slowly, normal returned. Not the old normal, a new one. A normal built on awareness. The kind of awareness you can't unlearn once life teaches it to you. I became more careful with my boundaries in every relationship, not just family. When someone asked for personal information, I paused. When someone asked me to just trust them, I asked for clarity. When someone tried to move fast, I slowed down. And the strange thing is, that didn't make me colder. It made me safer. It made me stronger. It made me more honest. Because my boundaries weren't walls, they were protection. There were moments when I grieved what this experience had taken from me. Not just money or credit, it took my innocence, my belief that family would never cross certain lines, my comfort in sharing without thinking. That grief doesn't announce itself loudly. It shows up quietly when you hesitate before handing someone your address, when you feel tense at family gatherings, when you wonder what people are really capable of. But that grief also came with something unexpected. Growth. I learned how to advocate for myself. I learned how to say no without explaining. I learned how to separate love from obligation. And I learned that protecting yourself doesn't make you disloyal, it makes you responsible. If you're listening to this story and you've ever had that sinking feeling, that sudden realization that something doesn't add up, please don't ignore it. Trust your instincts. Check the facts. Protect your name. Because your name isn't just letters on paper. It's your future. It's your ability to build, to rent, to borrow, to move forward. And no one, no matter how close they are to you, has the right to gamble with that. They used my name without asking, and in the end, what they took wasn't just financial, they took my trust. But what I gained was something I didn't expect. Clarity, strength, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing I can protect myself even when it means disappointing people I love. I don't live in fear now. I live with awareness. And awareness is a kind of freedom, because once you stop ignoring red flags, you stop living at the mercy of other people's choices. Your life becomes yours again. Your name becomes yours again, and you never take that for granted. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. You're not alone in this. Leaving a like helps more people find stories like this. And if you appreciate calm, documentary-style storytelling, you're welcome to subscribe to Untold American Lives.